Hey there, welcome to the channel. My name is James, and here at 20th and 21st Movies, we are about all things cinema. All right, I'm excited to come on here and share with you my thoughts on a recent release from the Criterion Collection. This is a title that, when it was announced, I was very pleasantly surprised because this is a film that I would have never thought would have arrived in the Criterion Collection. But here it is in spine number 1247. It is Richard Pryor's only directorial outing. It is his first and only directorial outing, and it is a very triumphant one. It is JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling. This is the 1986 film written and directed by Richard Pryor. It is very autobiographical. You can call it semi-autobiographical. It's introspective. It really takes a look at this wonderful, or this very fascinating artist's life and his career. And it's very introspective, it's very contemplative. It's a very fascinating film. This is a film that I am so delighted has gotten some love from the Criterion Collection, and it's now available on this new 4K Ultra HD edition. So on the other side of this, I'm going to get into what I think about this movie. I've already given you some indication of what I think about it. I'll talk about the film. I'll talk about the 4K picture quality, how it looks on 4K, how it sounds, the supplements, and whether or not this is a title that you ought to consider adding to your collection. I think that some titles currently, as of the time this video is being recorded, are currently on sale on Amazon and at Barnes & Noble for a 30% off discount. So may not be a bad time to pick up certain titles like this. So on the other side of this, we'll talk about whether or not you should consider it. So let's get into it. All right, we're talking about Richard Pryor's film, JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling. And this is a film from 1986, so it's pretty late in Richard Pryor's career. By this time, he had done a number of epic films, comedy specials, and he had really made a name for himself in show business in very fascinating comedic films like Stir Crazy with Gene Wilder, or Car Wash, which is a famous film with that nice famous song. And, you know, Richard Pryor was in that film. He was also in one of my favorite films of his, Brewster's Millions, from the 1980s, a few years before JoJo Dancer. And of course, he also took flight with Christopher Reeve in Superman 3. So he's done a number of comedic specials. Most of them were big hits. Starred in some pretty epic comedic films, and now he's doing a film, in this film here in 1986, that really takes a look back on his life and his career, and he just really reflects on who he is as a person, really spawning from the very famous accident that he had where he basically burned himself over a good portion of his body accidentally, or maybe accidentally, we don't really know for sure, but there was some drugs involved. He burned himself, and this film takes place after the accident, or right before the accident occurs, and then once the accident happens, he then begins to reflect upon his life going back to his childhood and growing up around some of the older women in his life that raised him. He was raised in some pretty interesting circumstances, being around like brothels and different places, but just seeing the relationships he had with his mother, his grandmother, and the older ladies who were raising him, and then how he got his start into show business, how he finally, was able to break into doing comedy routines and getting into film. And just looking at how this artist saw himself and how he was looking at how he was able to conquer the demons in his life. This is such a fascinating look, a very different look at Richard Pryor, not just seeing him in his, stand-up comedy routines, which are laugh out loud funny, pretty rough from a language standpoint, as you can imagine, but very funny in many ways. And then the various films he was in, where there is starring with Gene Wilder in Stir Crazy, or starring in a film like Bustin' Loose, or Car Wash, Brewster's Millions, you name it. On and on and on. A lot of great, epic, comedic performances in film This is a more serious film where he takes a serious look back at his life as a comedian and as an entertainer. There's a lot of funny moments along the way, some really interesting characters. Of course, you have Debbie Allen, who stars as his ex-wife in this film, and she does a really nice job playing off of Richard Pryor's character. You also have several other fascinating performances from the supporting actors in this film. I'll actually crack open this case here and pull out this nice booklet, but you see the inside. You have your 4K disc, you have your Blu-ray disc. But let me go ahead and pull this out because my memory is not great these days. It has never really been great. So I'm going to read the cast here to you. So JoJo dancer, alter ego Richard Pryor. He played himself in this film brilliantly. I mean, I think this is one of the best performances of Richard Pryor's career in this film. And this is, you know, when you think about Richard Pryor's career, a lot of people don't even think necessarily about this film, but I am so happy that Criterion has released this because that's going to bring attention to what I think is one of Richard Pryor's most important films. So I am super excited to have it in my collection and that it's out. So Richard Pryor played himself. You had Debbie Allen, who played his ex-wife, Michelle. You had Art Evans, who played Arturo. You had Faye Hauser, who played Grace. Barbara Williams played Dawn. So these are some of his other ex-wives who also played in the film. And there were some pretty interesting comedic moments with all of the different women that he was married to, and just funny stuff. I'll just let you see it for yourself. The grandmother was played by Carmen McRae, and she was just absolutely wonderful in this film. You had appearances from Michael Ironside in here as well. You had Dennis Farina appear in this movie. Just some really interesting people that showed up along the way in this film. And this is a film that I've seen bits and pieces of through the years, but I've never actually watched it in its entirety until I got this wonderful Criterion edition in my hands a few days ago, and this is absolute physical media gold in my hands right here. So that's coming from someone that was familiar with this film growing up, saw bits and pieces of it, knew what it was about, but this was my first time being able to really sit down and watch it all the way through and really get to appreciate it in a way that I never had before, looking better than it has ever looked on home video, folks. And that's where we're going to talk about the 4K picture quality. And I'm going to tell you right now, this 4K picture for JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling, is stunningly gorgeous. This film was shot on film. This movie was shot on film in 1986. This is a 4K restoration from the original camera negative, and it is absolutely stunningly beautiful because it is beautifully organic. It is beautifully restored and cleaned up. I could not see a single blemish whatsoever in any frame of this film throughout the entire running time of this movie. This movie looks beautifully organic. It looks like a film that was shot in the 1980s. There was, to my eyes, I saw no signs of any digital noise reduction, no DNR, no fake scrubbing out the grain was done. The grain is retained beautifully. It is beautifully resolved. And this picture just looks really good. I mean, it looks beautifully resolved, looks sharp, detailed. It doesn't look like a film that was shot yesterday. It looks like a film shot in the 1980s, beautifully and perfectly restored. And it just looks absolutely gorgeous. The colors look great. It is a beautifully filmic, organic looking picture, and I was blown away at how beautiful this film looks. I mean, it just fantastic. Chef's Kiss, great example of a classic film being restored the way it should be restored, not trying to make it look like a film that was shot yesterday or a modern film, but restoring it to the way it should have originally looked projected in the movie theater. And maybe even better than that. I mean, that's how good this picture looks on 4K Ultra HD. The Dolby Vision does a nice job. The colors are not incredibly vibrant, but they're beautifully and richly presented with that nice Dolby Vision HDR. The dark, scenes, the night scenes, and the daytime scenes. Everything just looks terrific on this 4K. I saw absolutely nothing to complain about. So I think this is an absolutely beautiful restoration. In fact, I'll just read the back of this little slip here to just read what they say about the master, because they always say, you know, about the master. That's included in here. So it says, JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling is presented in the aspect ratio of 2:39:1. The film was restored in 4K by Sony Pictures Entertainment in 2023 from the original 35mm camera negative. The 2.0 surround soundtrack was remastered from the original 35mm LCRS DME magnetic tracks. I don't know what those acronyms stand for. Please be sure to enable Dolby Pro Logic decoding on your receiver to properly play the 2.0 surround soundtrack. I don't think I did that, but I think maybe it was fine because it sounded just fine. It sounded just perfectly fine. But yeah, I mean, once I saw, before I even watched this film and I read that Sony did the restoration, I already knew that I was in good hands and I was not disappointed whatsoever. This movie looks great. It sounds great. And I could not be happier with the presentation of JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling on 4K Ultra HD from the Criterion Collection. Fantastic presentation and could potentially, I mean, it's very early in the year, but this might be, you know, if you were to do like a top whatever picture quality 4K releases from Criterion of 2025, this could be in the early running for that. That's how beautifully organic this restoration looks. It's that good. As far as the supplements, I will say that from a supplement standpoint, that's where this release is a bit on the light side. There's not much in the way of supplements on this release. There is no commentary. I think that's perhaps a little bit of a miss. A commentary on this would have been wonderful to have on this. That's one thing I like about, you know, Arrow with their packaging, and they tend to put a lot of commentaries on their releases. I would have loved to see a commentary on this Criterion release, but we don't have that. I don't know if there is any existing commentaries on this on previous editions or not. I'll have to look into that. But you do have two special features that are on the disc that are a great example of quality over quantity. So what is on here is fantastic. You've got a nice interview with Robert Townsend where he's talking about Richard Pryor, the artist, and talking about this film. And that is a really, really good inclusion to have Robert Townsend talking about this movie. Of course, he did Hollywood Shuffle that got a Criterion release either at the beginning of 2024 or 2023. I forget which. But yeah, that is a really good release from Criterion, and it's great that Robert Townsend appears on this disc in a new interview. We also have a archive interview with director Richard Pryor from a 1985 episode of The Dick Cavett Show. Folks, that is a great inclusion by Criterion. Kudos to Criterion for including that, because Dick Cavett, I always love his interviews, and to see Dick Cavett and Richard Pryor playing off of each other is absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed watching that. So the Robert Townsend new interview and the inclusion of that archive discussion between Dick Cavett and Richard Pryor are two excellent additions on this edition from Criterion that are some very nice supplements. It just would have been nice if they could have included a commentary, maybe a visual essay, just a little bit more to flesh out this film a little bit more. But I think what they do include in here is some high quality, a couple of high quality extras. Now, also included in here, of course, as I showed you before, was the two discs. You have this nice little fold out. And in this fold out, you have an essay that is very good, that is very much worth reading from Hilton Alls called Songs of Innocence and Experience, that talks about Richard Pryor as an artist and talks about his journey in the entertainment industry and his journey in making this film, JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling. This is a wonderful fold out here, but that essay by Hilton Alls is definitely worth reading, and I highly, highly recommend checking it out. So the supplements, again, like I said, you know, could have been a little bit more added to this release to kind of flesh it out. But I think the extras that they do include on here and the inclusion of this essay, you know, gives you something to have a deeper appreciation of this film. So I can definitely give Criterion credit for that, even though I would have liked to perhaps seen a little bit more. On the inside of this case here, you see a picture of Richard Pryor here as he's visioning himself as a little boy, kind of counseling the younger version of himself in this film. Again, he's looking back on his life, very introspective, and just seeing his journey, coming out of that accident, being in the emergency room, being treated, and basically having an out-of-body experience and looking back on his life and reflecting back to his childhood and thinking, okay, what has led me to this point? And thinking about the mistakes that he's made and maybe how he could have done things differently, but just showing us, the audience, a little bit of himself, the soul of an artist. And I think that's what makes this film so incredible, is that this is an artist really showing us a piece of who he is as a person. And that's what makes JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling so powerful. And I'm so glad that they've included this probably little known piece of Richard Pryor's filmography in the collection. This film kind of reminds one of, and I don't know if this was influenced by All That Jazz, the Bob Fosse film, but this is a similar film in that regard. Seeing it's about an artist kind of reflecting on his life and dealing with the demons of his life, this Bob Fosse production starring Roy Scheider. I don't know if that at all influenced JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling, but I do think that these would make a nice double feature to watch, both of these together. But I can definitely highly recommend, based upon the film, especially if you're a Richard Pryor fan, this is a must, 100% must. If you have not seen it, or if you want to experience this on 4K Ultra HD, here it is. Or if you're interested in seeing this side of Richard Pryor, of an artist really showing you a piece of himself outside of the more popular works that you may be familiar with, this is a great addition, folks, that I can highly, highly recommend. There's a couple of special features on here that are definitely worth checking out, and the audio and the visual quality is top notch. This looks fantastic, sounds great on 4K, and I couldn't be happier to have this in my collection. But let me know in the comments section below, what do you think about this film? What do you think about JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling, if you've seen it? Is this a film that you're interested in? What are some of your favorite films starring Richard Pryor? Or are you one of those people that likes his films? Or do you like his stand-up routines? Or do you like them both? What aspects of Richard Pryor's work are you the biggest fan of? Let me know all that in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time at the movies. Peace.